Chapter 277 to 278, the end. "What's up, Doc?" said Broly, who appeared behind Zeno-sama, stroking his melon head with his feet. Yes. That's right. Broly not only had returned against all odds. He was on top of Zeno-sama's head, massaging his melon head with his toes in a very disturbing way. Something that took everyone's breath away, but especially Zeno's. He couldn't assimilate what was happening, it was too surreal, random, gross, and scary. Therefore, when he was able to accept the situation after a few seconds in which he was paralyzed, the first thing Zeno did was scream and cry like a faggot as he ran in circles on the platform with two chairs while Broly was still on top of his head. "Shut up, crybaby," Broly said as he came down from Zeno's head. However, his disturbing and random entry didn't end here. He grabbed the two Zenos by the head, one with each hand, disintegrated their thrones, and created in the middle of the platform a much larger, majestic and imposing one, and plof. He sat on the sofa, a Zeno on each knee, whose heads he stroked like cats. And although future Zeno didn't complain because he was being controlled and in part he liked it, the present Zeno simply couldn't move or even complain due to the deep fear he felt. "Did some cat eat your tongue? I'm sure you have a lot to ask instead of looking at me like I'm an extremely attractive ghost," Broly said to everyone, but especially to Daishinkan, who looked at him with perplexity. "How the hell did you broke my seal?" Daishinkan said, feeling complete incomprehension and fear for the first time. His best ability, and probably the only one he believed could defeat Broly, had failed, and that monster was holding the two Zenos as hostage. Everything that could be going wrong was going wrong. Interesting question indeed. "You have played your cards very well, Dai. Can I call you Dai? Come on, we are already friends. Anyway. That ability took me by surprise. You did an excellent job hiding this strategy in your mind and replacing my visions of the future with others so that I couldn't read or see what you were doing. This would have worked for anyone, but not for me. After all, this ability only seals all Broly that share the same essence. But, my true essence is my own reality. You have only sealed some avatars that I used to physically manifest myself here, so with some outside help of my own was easy to get all of my Brolys out of this annoying seal. Although sooner or later I would have succeeded in break it on my own, it would only have taken a few minutes, but of course I didn't want to wait that long. I said it from the beginning, there is not a single future in which I don't own this reality," answered Broly, flaunting his superiority before Daishinkan as he continued to caress the Zenos, showing that for him the kings of this reality were nothing more than his evil pets. A terrifying image, mostly because it was true, but Daishinkan still wanted to know if there was any chance that this was some kind of performance. Then why did it take me so long to appear if it was so simple? Because I wanted to appear just when you thought you had won. It's the best time to sink your morale. An implacable enemy that returns one time after another no matter how after being defeated using all your power. It's terrifying. It's heartbreaking, isn't it? Said Broly, answering Daishinkan's question before he could ask it. "Yes, that's what I wanted to know," said Daishinkan, buying time to plan another strategy to beat Broly, a strategy with little chance of success, but he had no choice but to try one after another until the end. However, Broly had no intention of extending this unexciting fight any longer, so without getting up from his chair and without stopping to caress the melon heads, he said, "I wanted to have a man-to-man match with you, without resorting to seals and other more indirect and unexciting tactics to win. But I see that we don't share the same intentions. It's been fun fighting like a Saiyan, just using my powers to counter yours. It's a shame to have to finish so soon, but I can't stay here all day. I have a reality to own." And after saying that, suddenly across the whole null realm, even in the heads of those with the ability or not to perceive sounds, could hear. "I'm the bone of my Broly. Godly my body and legendary is my blood. I have created over 1,000 Brolys. Unknown to loss. Nor known challenge. I have withstood training to create many cheat skills, yet my hunger for battle will never be satiated. So I pray, unlimited Broly works." And after these words that froze and made the blood of all those who heard them burn. FIU. 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 Countless Brolys appeared everywhere in the null realm until it became impossible for anyone to see a single trace of the infinite void of that dimension. Right now, if someone came to this dimension and investigated it from cover to cover, they would undoubtedly call it Broly Dimension in honor of the most predominant element in it. An infinite amount of Broly looked from all directions towards all the participants and especially Daishinkan. An image taken from hell itself that shrunk the already drowned hearts of all those who were in that dimension. There are millions of Brolys using the Migate no Goki, babbled Margarita, unable to believe what she was seeing. A single Broly had managed to blur all his reality. What would happen if? Which of them is the real one? Asked Belmod to Beerus to know if this technique was a hoax, had weak points, or if it really was as terrifying as they believed. Unfortunately for them, Beerus was unable to deliver any good news. All are real, and each one of them is as strong as the one you have seen fight so far. This can't be real, babbled Rumshi as he fell to his knees. This was too much, it was too crazy to be true. Our father can win. Right, Whis? Asked Kusa desperately to his brother, but Whis didn't answer. He was completely in shock as he looked at all the Brolys. Whis? 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 Until finally he was able to move his lips to express his thoughts. This is a nightmare. These are my other bodies created thanks to my Broly body multiplication technique, a technique that I have popularized with all the scions of my universes. An ability that uses the potential of the Scion's S cells to create clones capable of being as powerful as the user's base form, thus creating approximately 500 clones, which can be fused together to add all their power to a single body. The only downside? Not being able to transform into Super Saiyan by permanently using all that potential to create the bodies. However, my S cells have infinite potential, so I can create an infinite number of bodies and still use all transformations on any of them, since the potential of my S cells will never be exhausted no matter how many bodies I create. To overcome rivals that may seem minimally difficult to me, I can merge some of them to achieve a higher starting point in my marathon towards infinite power thanks to my transformations, but that's not necessary now that everyone is using the Migate no Goki. They all have perfect power. Do you get it? Broly said from his throne, smiling confidently as he showed to a whole reality that he surpasses everything both in quality and quantity. Everything was useless before his perfect infinite army of his perfect himself. That was something Daishinkan understood well. Even so, he couldn't throw in the towel yet. He had to fight to the end. This certainly has become very troublesome. He didn't know if he could defeat Broly, but was still not 100% sure if Broly would be able to defeat him. After all, there were still many skills that he hadn't shown yet. And suddenly, among the army of Broys, one of them entered the ring where Daishinkan was preparing to face the entire army. However, instead of fighting a crowd, would he once again fight a single Broly? Would he fight one Broly after another until he died of exhaustion or until he gave up? Would more Brolys join the fight when one of them was about to lose? Would the other Brolys assist this Broly to win quickly? Those were some of the thoughts that went around Daishinkan's head while they saw that Broly advanced towards him. Not enough, for you, said the Broly sitting on his throne at the same time as the Broly who was advancing towards his enemy disappeared. Has he teleported? No, he has disappeared. This is the skill he showed us on the previous occasion, Daishinkan thought as he looked from side to side waiting for the Broly that disappeared to materialize parts of his body to attack him. He hadn't forgotten this ability that came from his tail, an ability that allowed him to be undetectable and invulnerable except for the parts he used to attack, an annoying and dangerous ability, but one that he believed to be able to counteract. And while Daishinkan kept searching for the invisible threat, Broly said while putting his fingers in position to be snapped, "You know, I wasn't entirely sincere during the conference. Actually." Clash. Boom. Way HaHaHa. Shouted Daishinkan, who received an attack of unknown origin throughout his body, causing him to bleed for the first time in his life. What the hell? That Broly hadn't materialized at any time to attack him, and he didn't even know who, how, or with what he had been attacked. It was as if literally everything had collided against him. And the next thing he could verify is that he had been injured, and that he couldn't heal said wound. Actually, I can attack while I melt with everything. When I become everything, said Broly as he poured milk into his coffee cup, mixing the milk with the coffee, and, with telekinesis, he brought the contents of the cup to his mouth. Delicious. HaHaHa. However, Daishinkan HaHaHa had no time to enjoy those little pleasures of life. HaHaHa. Because he was being hit all over the place without being able to defend himself at all. HaHaHa. It was as if time and space had become a weapon that Broly was using against him. HaHaHa. However, this wasn't the worst for Daishinkan. He became extremely weaker the more injured he was, and all this was due to the reality invasion of Broly. What happens when two equally powerful super predators, at least statistically, meet and fight to the death? Without doubt an extremely complicated fight in which it's almost impossible to predict its outcome. In theory both have an equal chance of killing each other. However, what happens if one of these predators is specialized to hunt in icy climates and the other in hot climates? One in the sea and the other in the desert? One at night and one during the day? The answer becomes a little easier. The one who is able to drag his opponent into the environment in which he has a natural advantage. And that's exactly the role of reality invasion. Against Daishinkan in the Dragon Ball reality, Broly was fighting in the field of his enemy, putting him at a disadvantage, or at least not at an advantage, while his enemy enjoyed all the advantages that the reality that created that supreme being as the incarnation of some of the laws itself has. And right now, as the power of both grew distant, Daishinkan lost more and more connection with the laws of his reality, being plunged into the laws of Broly's reality, losing connection with the source of his power. My heavenly Strauss Requiem not only allows me to merge with all that I can encompass, but everything becomes part of me. All matter, all energy, all time, all space, all void. Everything! Shouted Broly while enjoying the show from his throne, explaining his ability to everyone with this practical example. Daishinkan was wounded and confused, but not defeated. Broly had merged with time and space and was using them as a weapon against him, something brutal and that he believed impossible until now. However, there were still ways to counter that brutal ability, he just had to distort time and space too. Keep suffering, since the same space-time distortion that Daishinkan had created to defend himself had turned against him. Broly was able to merge with everything, even with his own attacks. Everything becomes a weapon that I can use in the most imaginative ways possible. I like this irony. All this started when I lost my stance, and now I take over everything with 1 inch, Broly said as he looked at Daishinkan feeling desperate, not knowing what the hell to do. Only one of these Brolys using this ability had left him in this state. What if he used all of them at the same time? However, he could no longer know, Daishinkan had been completely defeated. Broly's ability can not only merge with time and space to attack Daishinkan, he could also merge with Daishinkan himself to attack and manipulate Daishinkan with Daishinkan itself. And prevent him from being able to do anything, not even heal. There was nothing he could do except kneel in front of Broly against his own will, which was even being manipulated by Broly's stand. My 3 realms and my Strauss have a limit on what they can cover. That limitation is the power I currently have. And that power, as you should already know, is infinite right now, so each of my bodies can fully encompass all the existing dimensions in this reality, Broly said from his throne as he sent the formless realm to the scared Zeno of his right hand, making him disappear. Contrary to what Broly expected at first, no one shouted when they saw their leader disappear, as if everyone had already accepted that end some time ago, so he continued with his monologue. I have bodies in every divine dimension, in the universe and in every timeline. Some have been there for decades and others were recently implanted. And they all have one purpose. Broly said as the Brolys around him project for everyone what was happening in every dimension. All the Brolys scattered throughout reality used their definitive stand, merging with everything and creating links between all the Brolys through the 3 realms and their stand until everyone and everything was connected. Our Strauss and our 3 kingdoms is the same. Now everything has become part of me and my will. And at the same time my reality has been superimposed on everything, the link between the two has been created in a perfect way. The time has come for the final touch. The Super Dragon Balls, thanks for gathering them for me and bringing them here, and my own legendary Dragon Balls. Said Broly while with telekinesis approached the Super Dragon Balls towards him and made his own Super Dragon Balls appear. What the hell are those green Dragon Balls? They are 1,000 of times bigger than the Super Dragon Ball. Shouted Kompa, Beerus, and everyone who had used the Dragon Balls in their life. They understood the implication of that color and that size. Those are Broly's Dragon Balls, and they are the most powerful that exist. Broly didn't lie when he said he had seen bigger ones. Said Ginger, remembering the phrase that Broly said when they saw the Super Dragon Balls for the first time. It's something unnecessary, since I could do it myself, but I find poetic that this story, called Dragon Ball, could end precisely with the collaboration of the supreme Dragon Balls of my reality, and this reality, Broly said wryly as one of his bodies summoned the two giant dragons. Two giant dragons appeared in the dimension plagued by Brolys, which scattered to make room for them, and obviously this caused a commotion in the public. If the appearance of the Super Dragon Balls caused a commotion, how could dragons not? Especially the super muscular dragon of Broly with many faces, mouths, spikes, and other extremely cool details. "That's your dragon?" shouted Kompa, Beerus, and everyone who had used the Dragon Balls in their life. Although they were impressed by their appearance, weren't surprised at all that this was their dragon, they were very similar. He wasn't lying when he said that he had seen more impressive dragons, said Yam, that like his sister also remembered Broly's comments the day of the tournament between the Universe 6 and 7. "How cool. It looks very strong," shouted Goku with a dangerous gleam in his eyes when witnessing that dragon. His Saiyan blood kept telling him that he should have a fight right now. Clank. Something that earned the disapproval of the entire Universe 7. "Do you seriously want to fight with that dragon?" In this situation. However, while that comic gag with Goku took place, Broly was still taking over his reality in an official way through a simple wish. "Ask your wish," asked the two dragons, in their respective languages. And two bodies of Broly, each in a different language, said, "From this moment and irreversibly, this reality belongs to me and becomes part of mine." "Wish granted," both dragons replied, lighting their eyes red to activate their Deus Ex Machina ability. In this way, using as a medium the same abilities that Broly could use to unite both realities, the two dragons of wishes, one from the Dragon Ball reality and other from the Broly reality, joined with this wish so easy to grant to Broly, since they only needed to give him the push he not even needed. Broly used his reality invasion, imposing his laws on all the reality, the heavenly Strauss Requiem, to become one with everything and modify that everything to change it to his liking, making it part of his own reality, and irreversible damage so that that action couldn't be undone. From this moment on, the reality of Dragon Ball became part of the three realms of Broly. Broly had one. "Has everything finished? Haven't I noticed a big change?" All the gods asked, since they didn't notice any change. They waited even if it was an earthquake or something. After all, their entire reality had been displaced to another place and had been radically modified. A good god is the one that when performing a miracle nobody realizes that it has been a miracle. "Young Padawans," said Broly, teleporting the deities of the stands to his feet. At the same time Daishinkan, wounded and defeated, disappeared from the ground, and moments later he appeared healed by his side, with the mark of the third eye on his forehead that all the other Broly lackeys had. Then the same thing happened with Zeno and with Zeno's nannies, who Broly resurrected. The entire court of gods was gathered around the new supreme god whom no one could defeat. "Deities, kneel before the new king of all Broly, the true legendary Super Saiyan," said Daishinkan, Broly's new loyal lackey, to all his children and slaves, indicating that the power in this reality changed and that they now owed loyalty to another despot. And that they, like everyone else, should show loyalty to Broly and kneel in his presence, even Beerus, Shin and Whis. Plof. 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 This is funny, Broly said, enjoying this moment as he continued stroking the melon heads of his new pets. "Okay, you can get up. Surely you will have many questions such as, what am I going to do with you and your universes from now on, right?" "Yes. That's a good point," said Beerus, representing all the deities who dared not speak. At this point, he was no longer afraid of anything. He had already been humiliated by Broly in any way possible. Nothing he did to him now could top him. "You don't have to worry, I will never eliminate any universe. In any case I will create new ones, but never eliminate them. And you are also safe unless you commit very serious crimes, such as not putting onion in the potato omelette. I'll send you a list tomorrow," said Broly, downplaying his takeover. Unlike Zeno, he would be a kind god, for now. That greatly relieved all mortals and native gods of the universes, who finally saw some hope in their existence in the long term. Broly could be many things, many of them very bad, but not a genocide. So just to make sure they wouldn't be harmed, Shin, one of the gods who knew the hatred Broly felt towards the gods, asked then. Will everything continue the same as until now? Well, some things will change. From now on we will demand from the gods better results in their work, proof that they are doing everything right, that they aren't abusing their power. Basically, I will demand a little more efficiency from you, something that you lack, as I have been able to verify after all these years of spying on you. The following Monday that comes you will start using the agile method and will impute the hours in Jira. I will send a Teams meeting to your Outlook to explain all this, said Broly, who had great plans to make the Dragon Ball reality a solvent, efficient and effective reality. None of the gods knew exactly what Broly was talking about, but they understood the context. That son of a great bitch would make them do what they hated the most in the whole world. Work. Something horrible that didn't happen with their previous boss, but they couldn't complain too much. It was better to have a demanding boss than one who kills you out of hand. So they avoided asking more about that matter for now and moved on to another topic: what happens to the universes that haven't attended the tournament? They are also aware of all this, and will they have to follow these rules as well? Don't worry about these guys, the other universes will have to do the same as you. I could have forcibly teleported them here to enjoy the lathe, but I preferred not to do that. Those poor gods who believed themselves to be in a privileged position will soon see that they have missed the most exciting event of their lives. Ha 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 ha. When someone tells everything that has happened, they will be unable to believe it. Ha 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 ha. Said Broly, who prepared in his mind jokes directed at the gods of the universes 1, 5, 8 and 12. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Any other question? Said the counselor Daishinkan, seeing that Broly was busy with his evil plans, and the gods didn't dare to ask anything. What about the tournament? Goku asked from the stands. So Broly stopped laughing and answered, since he had been waiting for that question for minutes, the tournament. Ah yes, in a moment we will repair the ring, we heal everyone, and you can start the tournaments if you want. The mortals who won the tournament can make me a wish. The gods of the winning universe will be exempt from working for 4 years, and there will be no penalties for the loser. And at the end you will have a magnificent feast with food made by me just for having participated. Could this tournament be held on more occasions? Asked Goku, and his obsession about tournaments again. Therefore, Broly answered again, yes. I plan to summon all the universes every 4 years to play, and maybe later we will also do the same with other timelines or realities, whether they are parallel to this or not. As you have seen, there is no disadvantage or punishment for participating, only advantages. So I am waiting for your voluntary participation. Maybe we could even make a business out of this. Yes. Long live the king of all Broly. All hail the king of all Broly. Goku said, praising the new supreme god that suited him best. He was so happy that forgot that Broly had used him as a pawn in his plans. Well, I guess everything ended well for us, said Gohan with extremely mixed feelings, especially after knowing that Broly had lied on them all his life. Time will tell, said Piccolo and Vegeta, skeptical and pessimistic about everything that was related to Broly. Meanwhile, in the Capsule Corp mansion. So now I'm the king of all. And that's all my history until now, Bulma, said Broly, who since the beginning of the tournament had been being completely sincere with his wife, explaining in great detail all his life up to this moment. And Bulma, very understanding while pampering the baby Trunks, replied, so, you are a man from another reality who reincarnated here to take control of the entire reality, and marry me, the most wonderful woman in the world and your first love since you were little despite being a fantasy character. I am right? Yes, sorry to have hidden all this until now. Broly replied, a little worried that Bulma is very, very, very angry right now for having lied to her for so many decades. And after a long pause in which she thought what to say next, approached Broly, still carrying Trunks in her arms. Well, I can't say that this surprises me too much. We all had theories about your true origin, some of them even weirder, but this doesn't change anything of how I feel about you. In any case, it shows me how much you love me. So you're not mad? Broly asked as he bent down to receive a passionate kiss from Bulma, who approached him in a flirtatious and sensual way. No, of course not, said Bulma, who suddenly changed her attitude and instead of giving him a kiss handed Trunks to him, turned her back on and went to the shower to clear her thoughts. However, from now on, it's up to you to do all the chores around the house and help the children with whatever. Starting by changing Trunks' diaper. Are you really not mad? Asked Broly to his wife with a certain tone of sarcasm. No, of course not. And hurry up, you have a dinner to prepare for your family, friends, and Vegetas whom you have lied so far in few minutes. Answered Bulma, destroying with that phrase the sarcasm detector that Broly had recently built and that was at the other end of the mansion. Prom. Yes, your mother is angry little Trunks. And believe me, a woman's resentment is almost as infinite as your father's power. Hopefully she will have forgiven me before the day of my next business. Oh. Ha, you have another Saiyan tail my little champion, said Broly, the new king of all that would surely sleep on the couch tonight punished by his wife, while changing the diaper to his newborn son and thinking about his next master plan. Millions of years after the events of Dragon Ball Super. In Origin reality, or more specifically at the official headquarters of Origin Entertainment Company, the annual meeting between the directors of the company had begun. All those with responsibility in the company were together in a large boardroom with a long and immense table in the middle chaired by President Ricardo at one end and the other directors who sat on both sides as always. However, this time there was a special guest sitting at the other end of the table, a guest who was looked at by everyone with hostility, disgust and even pity. And Abalon was, extremely intimidated, cowering in a chair and room too big for him. Hi, Abalon. Do you know why you are here? Asked the President Ricardo, starting this corporate meeting, but that seemed more like an interrogation. So Abalon, having no other alternative, answered to his boss, the most powerful person in all reality, despite not wanting to do so, this. President Ricardo. Origin. President Origin. Said the eccentric President Ricardo, interrupting Abalon to remind the questioned and all employees how they should call him. Therefore, Abalon tried to confess again in a more correct way, why, yes. I think I know. President Origin. How could he not know why was sitting there? A few days ago for some reason the company discovered that not only he, but many other employees had been using the doubles to work. Since this became known there was a great internal commotion about the lack of professionalism of the employees, the lack of security in the facilities, but above all, that they were paying very high salaries that could be fully mechanized thanks to the doubles that their employees used. After that discovery, many employees who used the doubles were fired, although not all of them. According to the legends, the employees who only used the doubles to work remotely but who performed their tasks normally, those who demonstrated that their work couldn't be 100% automatable and those who didn't comply with some other rules weren't fired. And now Abalon was praying to be one of the few chosen ones. After all, his work was very artistic and couldn't be 100% automatized, so he still hoped that they wouldn't fire him a few years before his retirement. Great, that saves us from wasting time with unnecessary explanations. As you may have already heard from some of your colleagues, those whose work cannot be 100% automated haven't been fired. And, you happen to be one of those who fall into that category. Besides, you have been with us for a long time and you will retire in a few years. For these reasons, we had thought not to fire you. Said President Ricardo, relaxing his serious facial expression to convey to Abalon that he was out of danger. A message that filled Abalon with joy, who metaphorically passed from the deepest purgatory to the most idyllic paradise with only one step. Oh. Aha. Thank you, sir. Who will we weaver? Certain things that we have found in your double and complaints from other coworkers have made us change our mind. Said President Ricardo, changing his facial expression back to a darker one while projecting on a boardroom screen a folder called Abalon Case. A message that plunged Abalon into utter misery, who metaphorically passed from the most idyllic paradise to the most terrible and dark hell with a single kick in the ass. What? We have received many internal sexual harassment lawsuits against you since a few years ago from Ms. Bromley. Lawsuits that the internal team couldn't verify, since the majority were doubles who didn't do their job correctly and that's why they have been fired, and because they were difficult to verify. After all, you work in a room with no one else and with rigged security cameras. However, thanks to the fact that we have been able to access the history of your double, we have been able to verify that they were true. Said President Ricardo, playing on the screen videos that demonstrated without any doubt that Abalon is unrecyclable scum. Inappropriate comments, indecent propositions, exhibitionism, eat pizza with pineapple, harassment, touching in forbidden places, abuse of power, burp the alphabet in French, all that and much more was perfectly recorded and documented. A criminal material, or at least sensitive, controversial, and easily misunderstood that almost made Abalon jump out of his chair and shit himself in fear. Holly shit. How's that possible? I'm sure I deleted all this from my double. But that's not all, your double synced to your corporative account, ahem, has given us access to all your internet history and all your files, downloads, conversations. You know what that means, right? Said President Ricardo, making real the nightmare that every living being with an internet connection has ever had. A nightmare that metaphorically had just exploded against Abalon's scrotum. Oh God. I'm dead. Everyone can do what they want with their private life, whatever they want. We aren't going to judge you and fire you for the videos you watch, but things like these conversations where you insult the entire board of directors of this company, these emails in which you sell company information and other cyber illegal activities that compromise our security, that you've been stealing office supplies. And above all, the fact that we have found, I will try to say it with some tact, certain videos in which you tricked the daughter of Mr. Fernando, one of our controlling shareholders here, into thinking that you were a cute boy of her age with a lot of money, has made us change our minds about whether it's good or not keep you in the company, not counting all the criminal material that piles up on your computer that would be of great interest to the police, said President Ricardo again, trying to hold Mr. Fernando, who was about to pounce on Abalon's neck. Clank. My daughter is only 369 years old. You fucking pedo pervert trash lolicon. Shouted Mr. Fernando, appeasing his almost unlimited fury by insulting and hitting the table instead of Abalon's testicles, as he would like to do. Although those blows weren't very necessary, living by this situation was already hitting the soul of Abalon, who despite being immortal seemed to be losing years of life every second he spent in that torture room. Yes. I'm dead. Very, very dead. Okay, for the color of your face I think you understand your awful situation. However, don't worry so much, at the same time is your lucky day. Mr. Fernando and Mrs. Bromley are good and understandable people, and they have promised not to report you or the company to the police if you are fired immediately, and pay them the corresponding compensation. In addition, our company also promises not to send all the evidence found to the police as long as you sign this contract voluntarily. It's a good offer, don't you think? Said Olivia, President Ricardo's secretary, who delivered the contracts that Abalon must sign if he didn't want to live the rest of his eternal life in a cell. Flap. Flap, flap. However, the more Abalon read the contracts, more appealing the option of life imprisonment seemed to him. These abusive compensations to the company, to Ms. Bromley and Mr. Fernando, were far superior to all the savings of his life. To pay this, he would have to sell all his properties and go into debt, and also renounce the pension for the entire life of the company, with which he had to have his golden retirement in addition to all the insurance and acquired rights. And what was worse, finding a job in your specialty to continue paying compensation will be extremely difficult, since in the entertainment industry Origin Entertainment Company practically monopolized everything. It was like Disney, but more evil. Signing that was almost worse than going to jail. It's like being a slave to himself, so Abalon tried to bargain a bit by appealing to his loyal years of service. But, this is... Don't worry about the film. Mrs. Bromley can finish her work, although it would be more appropriate to call it her work, as we have been able to verify almost all the work on this film has been produced by her. We wish you good luck in this new stage of your life, said President Ricardo, subtly hinting that these were no negotiable terms and that this was his only alternative. Yes sir. Said Abalon, signing the contract in front of the entire board of directors with one of the worst sensations a person could feel. The feeling of being digging your own grave and still having no choice but to keep digging, especially if that tomb is an abusive document that practically turned you into a slave for all eternity, signed with contractual magic that could never be broken and had to be fulfilled whenever you want or not. Years later. I hate my life. Abalon, after many years of suffering, was finally very lucky. Finally, he was able to find a job to only pay the millionaire compensations. Thanks to technological advances, the beings of Origin reality enjoyed an eternal life and an unlimited and free amount of basic necessities, thanks to the unlimited amount of wealth, thanks to the creation magic and technology. Without money, a person could still survive without any problem and have a standard of living infinitely higher than that of the richest person on planet Earth in the 21st century. The money was spent mainly on entertainment, art, purely exclusive and elitist events, or on products not very necessary for daily life that were difficult to extract, manipulate or obtain. That's why getting money was so complicated in this reality. Having and being able to get money was something rare and a sign of status within that reality, which separated the nobility from the common people. Until recently, Abalon was like a minor nobleman on the verge of having the golden retirement that he always dreamed of, surrounded by unnecessary and extravagant luxuries with absolute tranquility that showed his status and power in front of others. Abalon. You have finished the movie of the dwarf sticking his head in the ass of the other dwarf with a dummy head? And now, he was forced to work giving 100% of his salary to those who had ruined his life, in one of the few marginal entertainment industries in which the Titan Origin Entertainment Company wasn't involved with, for now. The fetishist midget gay porn industry. Yes. In no time. A job he hated in exchange for a reward he would never enjoy, something that depressed Abalon as he never imagined. Or so he believed. Hey guys, today is the premiere of the new film of Ice Guy of the ERA saga. Is anyone going to see it? Asked one of Abalon's co-workers to the rest. The premiere day? That's practically impossible. Not only do you have to buy the ticket thousands of years in advance, the price is astronomical. It's not worth it, I'll see it another day, or download it illegally, answered other of Abalon's co-workers. Yeah. I know. But there are many leaks that say that this new Ice Guy of the ERA, the true Legendary Super Saiyan, could be the best so far. I just wanted to know if any of you had bought the ticket and for some reason cannot go to the cinema today. Said the first coworker using the puppy eyes technique with his companions. A skill that didn't affect the second coworker at all, ha. Stop dreaming. Even if that happens, no one will give it to you for free. Much less us and much less to you. In addition, the tickets are linked to your identification number so that no one else can use or sell them. Ha. You are absolutely right. Said the first coworker, giving up with a sense of humor. That's right. Abalon not only had to work like a slave in a job that he hated. He also had to endure being reminded about his old job, that the best film of the saga was the one that he hadn't produced and that now he couldn't even go to see the movie when billions of years ago he had always free tickets for the premiere day. Not even finish his workday cheered up the depressed Abalon, who walked into his small and almost empty apartment devoid of the premium equipment that could only be obtained from the Origin Entertainment Company. I hate this. This was the routine that Abalon had followed since he was fired thousands of years ago: get up from his filthy apartment, go to work, come back to his filthy apartment, waste time playing video games, reading books and watching free series and movies, sleep and start over again. However, today something changed. What's this? A movie ticket? Said Abalon after see something new his mailbox. A numbered ticket for Ice Guy of the ERA, the true Legendary Super Saiyan for today. Has the company sent it to me by mistake? Is it an act of mercy? Or maybe mocking? Nevertheless, I have nothing better to do today. At the very least I can boast of having gone to see the damn movie tomorrow. Abalon left his shitty apartment and teleported directly to his seat in the cinema using his technological advanced movie ticket. Now he just had to wait for the movie to start while he enjoyed the all-you-can-eat buffet that he could materialize from his armchair. Until the movie finally started. Welcome number 999999999 of the promotion 878990439303837657657634546899789534645476767821351. You could say that today is the luckiest day of all your existences. The movie started exactly at the beginning of it all, when Abalon gave his powers to Broly. Luckily, I removed all the evidence of the cheating I did with the stands the same day. If I had procrastinated, there would be another crime on my long list. Said Abalon with relief upon seeing that they finally used film fragment that he had created instead of the real one. The movie was pleasing the public a lot. Ha. Everyone laughed by the jokes that Broly played on the Vegeta family, his father and a lot of science. Everyone was excited about his first fight against Beerus and how he managed to manipulate them to get his power up. He's too OP. Everyone was surprised to see how powerful Broly had become in such a short time and about his trip to Universe 6 to get the Super Dragon Balls. He trolled us. I didn't expect this. Everyone was utterly shocked upon seeing that Broly on the Salada planet had been pretending to have lost control in addition to everything he had planned to achieve his goal of obtaining the Podera, the Hakai energy, his transformations and the Super Dragon Ball. That's an interesting misunderstanding. Let's see how Broly resolve this. What the hell is happening? Has this been done by Broly? But when has he done it? Everyone were excited to see this setback in Broly's life. The deities of Universe 6 and 7 believed that Broly was a time traveler when everyone in the room knew that he wasn't and that Broly couldn't explain the truth, and also wondered about the new mystery about the temporal block that prevented the gods from traveling to the future. Everyone asked questions, but among all of them, there was someone who asked something totally different from the others. How weird. I was able to see the entire history of Broly until the Z saga began. However, I didn't see any of this. Did Ms. Bromley make it up? Said Abalon, that no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't remember the events he was seeing on the screen. What you never expected is to hear the answer to that question. That's why I kept all of this from you. Abalon. Kept all of this from you? What was the man sitting next to him talking about? Instead of soda, he was drinking alcohol? Abalon? Did the guy sitting next to him know him? Is he a former coworker? An admirer perhaps? These were some of the thoughts that haunted Abalon's head as he turned his head to the right to see who that person was, and when he could finally see that person, he was stunned. What the? The man next to him was extremely huge, with incredibly large and defined muscles. His hair was totally white, the same color as the simian fur that covered almost its entire body, the same color as his long ape tail with which he held his popcorn that was reflected in the sinister third eye of his forehead. Impossible. Abalon thought, looking stunned at the character who sat next to him and the child he was seeing right now on the big screen. There were some differences, but without doubt they were exactly the same person. However, before jumping out of the chair, scream like a faggot suffer a heart attack after seeing Broly, he tried to use the logic and keep calm. Wait, this has to be a joke. It's impossible that this is happening. This must be a joke of President Ricardo. This must be why they have sent me an entry for this movie. Yes, this must be a hidden camera. Keep calm, Abalon, don't get upset, don't give them that satisfaction. Or that's what he tried to do, until he heard something that couldn't be part of President Ricardo's joke. Where are my stands, Abalon? Stands? Wait. He had removed all evidence about his initial scam about the stands. There should only be 2 people with knowledge about this. He and... No way. What the hell are you doing? Shouted Abalon, who finally realized that this wasn't a joke and tried to run away. However, he was instantly gagged and tied to his chair by an invisible force. Ugh. Yes, yes. I know. You have many questions. Many of them will be answered in the next few minutes, but if you insist so much I will make you a spoiler. But telepathically, we cannot disturb the other people who are enjoying my movie, said Broly, showing good manners and respect for others in a movie theater by speaking telepathically with one of his arch-enemies. What the hell's is happening? Abalon asked through Broly's telepathic channel after calming down. And of course, Broly began to explain everything how he liked. From the beginning, you'll see. After you ripped me off and in compensation, gave me another opportunity to choose less incredible powers in theory. I chose my rewards wisely. I chose a reality with a Deus Ex Machina power open to everyone, with which I could achieve everything I wanted quickly, a body with an infinite potential modified with the Jugun that I bought from you to remove all its imperfections, the Nen, that in conjunction with my infinite potential I was able to create the ability I wanted, and a certain single-use item that could save my life at the right time. Acquisitions that would only give a great advantage to be the fucking master in the Dragon Ball reality if not everything went as I wanted, or conquer all Dragon Ball reality and return here unauthorizedly to, among other things, enjoy my own movie, if everything went the way I wanted. There was no need for Abalon to ask too much about what happened. The fact that he was here with him indicated that everything had turned out as he wanted, so he didn't interrupt Broly unnecessarily and let him continue with his evil genius monologue while stroking his stuffed cat in the shape of Beerus. With the help of the card I bought and all the powers that I got and created thanks to my talent, mind, perseverance, and the Dragon Balls, I managed to get back to the same office from which everything all started. From there, I began to adapt to the laws of this reality to be able to fully use my powers here, and eventually, I went to other realities to increase my power and probability to conquer everything and take absolute control of your work and life. Broly said while stroking Abalon's hair, as if he was also his pet. A way of treating him that was making him angry, scaring, and disgusting in excess. However, his words were even more fearsome. What? My life. Yes, your work and life. It all started when you voluntarily acquired great product whose market target are lazy workers like you, the double that I and my team invented to control everything you did, and incidentally what a lot of your colleagues did, but that isn't important now. Every time you were at home jerking off frantically with your double in automatic mode, I was the one working for you, with the aim of course, of eliminating all my suspicious activities from your registry, replacing those compromising images and audios for another ones, and use your facilities to do what I wanted with my reality or others. Every time you decided to take direct control of your double, you could only see, hear, smell, taste and feel what I wanted, and in the same way, you only did what I wanted, although from your perspective you seemed to do what you wanted to do. And every time, very few, you physically went to the office, everything was prepared for you to only do what I wanted you to do. A documentary film of me with false scenes made by me that would never be used for anything. Your uselessness has served me well, you were a great pawn, until you stopped being necessary, so I caused your dismissal, said Broly, explaining to Abalon how for millions of years he had been constantly controlling and monitoring him. A revelation that shocked, scared and angered Abalon like never before, who tried to rush against Broly to kill him. You did all. Wait. You are the... However, once again he was held and gagged in his chair. Oh come on, don't be angry. It was necessary to erase you from the equation in the same way it was necessary for you steal my stands. The delivery date of the film was getting closer and closer, and therefore you would be more annoying to impersonate, but you also had to get a replacement before your retirement. Therefore, through your double I create a fictitious selection of staff that never left your office. Yes, all the people you interviewed were my creations, such as Miss Bromley, said Broly, who momentarily transformed his tail into Miss Bromley while striking an extremely sexy and suggestive pose. A pose that would excite Abalon in other circumstances, but not now. Now he only felt an existential emptiness while trying to relate all that to the greatest misfortune he had suffered in his life. No way. That's... I have access to your internet history and therefore all the porn videos you watch. In this way was easy to know how your perfect woman prototype looks like, so I created Mrs. Bromley, one of my avatars, for you to choose her as your successor. With Ms. Bromley within the company officially to do whatever I wanted, and taking into account how incompetent and perverted you are, I had more than necessary tools to cause your dismissal. To provoke your dismissal at first I thought about creating false evidence of many crimes, among which sexually harassing Miss Bromley, but, damn. That wasn't even necessary. You alone committed so many crimes that it was unnecessary for me to create false ones. Ha 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 ha, said Broly while isolating the sound produced from his armchair and Abalon's, so that no one could hear his next screams. Fucking bastard. Was you. You alerted the company about the existence of the doubles, and gave them all the illegalities that I thought I had erased. Son of a bitch. You ruined my life. Shouted Abalon, unleashing all the frustration that he had accumulated throughout his life and all the hatred that he never believed to be so abysmal towards the responsible for the greatest misfortunes of his life. Yes, that was my goal, get my revenge and leave a free pass for Ms. Bromley, me, to take control of the movie that you are now watching thanks to the ticket I sent to your apartment, bought with the money you send monthly to Miss Bromley. Any question? Said Broly with great satisfaction upon seeing Abalon's face full of hatred and tears. Yes, that was the face full of despair that Broly had been dreaming of for years. However, for Abalon the hatred and desire for revenge were far superior than his fear or despair. So while cursing his mortal enemy with all his soul said with bloodshot eyes, okay, you have taken revenge on me and have produced your own movie. And now what? Do you think that President Ricardo and the others will never notice? Sooner or later, they will discover everything and eliminate you. Doesn't matter in which reality you hid. You will have no escape. It didn't matter if he erased his memory or killed him after this. The Origin Entertainment Company would one day realize that something strange had happened and they would eliminate him, and even if that didn't happen, Broly would live in constant fear of being discovered by them from now on. This was Abalon's pitiful and desperate revenge and consolation. However, his screams and curses didn't scare Broly in the least, only made him laugh, ha 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 ha. Sooner or later? Abalon, my friend, they are going to find out right now. While Broly and Abalon had been talking, the movie progressed, and now they were in the exact point in which Broly undertook his most dangerous journey. Magnetic force on. Abalon. Broly on the big screen had started his journey to Origin reality, and... ah. No way. Kai-ah-ha-ha. Incredible. Insane. The audience went crazy in the same way that we all went crazy when in Endgame after all the portals were opened the Captain America said Avengers, assemble. This cinematographic saga had an extremely long history in which practically everything had happened. However, this was the first time that a protagonist of Sky of the ERA that hatched a cunning plan to return to Origin Raylet. The leaks were true, this could be the best movie of the entire saga. And possibly one of the best fiction stories until now. What's the meaning of this? None of this happens in the movie we approved. However, the opposite was happening with the directors of Origin Entertainment Company and those responsible for the Isekai of the ERA saga who were watching the movie right now in a cinema. None of this happened in the movie that Miss Bromley gave them, and what was being shown in all the cinemas of the whole reality was a company secret that should never see the light. A secret that the Broly from the movie, breaking the fourth wall, explained to the whole public. That's how it is, my friends, these movies were never fiction. There are infinite realities below this one, and every time you play an Origin Entertainment Company video game you are in reality going to one of these realities with an avatar that exists in that reality with the secret purpose of increase the power of top-ranked executives and employees of the company with the powers of that reality at the same time you pay them for that. You are only machines for the processing of abilities, technology, powers, information, physical and metaphysical laws that also generate benefits. And right now the President Ricardo is However, before more dark secrets about Origin Entertainment Company, by using some skill, the time stopped in the whole reality. What the hell is happening? Shouted President Ricardo, who stopped the time in the whole reality after realizing that something absurd was happening. Unlike many others directors of Origin Entertainment Company, the President Ricardo didn't see the film before its premiere or in pre-production. He wanted to enjoy in secret his favorite saga without knowing anything about this movie before the premiere. That's why he didn't use any of his information gathering skills as long as they were related to the movie. When he saw that Broly returned to Abalon's office was shocked at first, but after that initial scare he thought this was just a master move of the new director, Miss Bromley, to make the movie more interesting and demonstrate her importance to the company in her first job. However, seeing how Broly, breaking the fourth wall, began to explain the truth behind his company and his plan to become the absolute god of all realities, he understood that the film couldn't continue being broadcast. For this reason, he stopped time to gather all his advisors and decide what to do with all this without anyone interfering. Erase everyone's memory? Turn back the time? Maybe both? Whatever, but no one must find out about this before his origin project had ended and thereby achieved total omniscience, omnipresence and omnipotence over all the realities. However, all those thoughts were interrupted when he heard President Ricardo. Its present origin. President Ricardo protested for not being called as he wanted. But after that semi-automatic answer, he realized that must have been impossible to hear that. After all, his ability to stop time was still activated, so no one in all of reality should be able to say anything right now, one moment. Therefore, he leaned back and focused all his senses on the chair that was right behind him, where he could see a familiar face, staring at him as he tried to get up from his chair without success. And after seeing his face and analyzing the situation, Ricardo drew certain conclusions about what happened to Abalon. This you're doing? Have you broken the unwavering contractual magic and revealed everything in the firm? Is this your vengeance? I don't know how you have done it, although you will tell me shortly. Oh. You will wish being eliminated instead of fired. No. No. It wasn't me. It was him. He has done all this shit. He even created false evidence of all those crimes that you accused me of. I am innocent. Shouted Abalon, pointing to Broly, his mortal enemy, the cause of all the problems of the Omniverse at the same time that he lied to impute his crimes to him. No way. You are the Broly from the film. Everything is true? Said President Ricardo, now truly understanding what was happening, but still had a hard time accepting that this was real. Broly had really arrived at this reality and had caused all this? And Broly, without giving importance to anything, answered as he continued eating popcorn and drinking soda, yes, more or less. Can you cancel that ability? I want to keep watching my movie. You aren't aware of what will happen to you, right? Said Ricardo, more angry than ever as he flew towards Broly to beat him to death and rip out his brain and soul to know exactly what he had done so far, and after that delete all his existence from every dimension, in this reality or another. However, Broly was still undeterred, as if the most powerful being in this reality didn't want to torture and kill him, you see. In other circumstances I would have played with you a little, fight at a level similar to yours, make it seem that you had defeated me, come back from the dead with much more power and defeat you in a practically humiliating way, showing that you never had a chance against me. But I'm too old for this shit. And at the end of that phase. Crash. Slash. Waya. Ricardo suddenly felt an indescribable pain throughout his existence that made him lose consciousness almost immediately. Clash. When he woke up, he was back in his chair, with the movie running once again and being unable to move or use any keen power. He couldn't even speak except through Broly's telepathic channel. What the hell? How is this possible? I am the President Origin, the most powerful being in this reality. How can you have power over me? Ricardo, if you hadn't stopped the movie you would know. I traveled to many Shonen Jump worlds to get extra powers, an army to use in the tournament, the ability to ignore Zeno's powers, and I also traveled to a non-Shonen Jump world for this occasion. Specifically to an anime called Tenchi Mayo Ryooki, Broly replied telepathically while still enjoying his snacks. Wait, no. Babbled Ricardo while remembering why he visited Abalon's office millions of years ago, and began to fear the worst. And Broly, without paying attention to the dark expressions of Ricardo and Abalon, because he paid more attention to the film, began his monologue again. Like you, I also sought to obtain the absolute omniscience, omnipresence, omnipotence and existence in the whole omniverse, and not only that, being also capable of see the own omniverse and reality from above. Something that couldn't accomplish in the Dragon Ball reality with the Dragon Balls or in another Shonen Jump world. That's why I needed to acquire from other animes the powers of someone or something with these characteristics in their realities, and there are only two methods that can accomplish this. U method, also called Origin Project, with you copy the laws of this kind of being without them noticing from this reality, thus you will be able to use them in this Origin reality and the other realities below this one. And extremely safe, but at the same time extremely slow method. Therefore was discarded for me. After all, you would realize if I used the same technology, and also you would get the prize before me. And my only method, go to a reality from an anime or manga world, defeat that being, kidnap it and absorb it to get all its powers and loyalty. However, that tactic that had worked for me with the other character had a very big problem now. How the fuck I can defeat and absorb a conceptual being like Lord of Nightmares from Dragon Slayer with my powers in his reality when I don't have that level? It would be impossible. I know my limitations. But fortunately in the anime industry exists a character called Tenchi Mayo. No, this can't be happening. Babbled Ricardo again, collapsing before Broly could finish his monologue, because he already knew what he would say to him without the need to use an ability. Even so, Broly finished his explanation, if only so that Abalon understood why he was completely screwed. Tenchi Mayo, that later would become Kami Tenchi, the most powerful being in the anime and manga. At a certain point he was more or less human, and this was all I needed to be able to take his power. For thousands of years I was hidden in that reality, absorbing the laws slowly, since its laws were harder for me to digest for not being this a Shonen Jump world. I waited patiently until I could make myself perfectly compatible with the laws of that reality and preventing the three Chosen Washu, Tsunami, and Tokimi from detecting me until Tenchi Mayo was about to be created. In the same way that Abalon did with me in the beginning with Broly's body, I introduced my consciousness into Tenchi before he was born, and thus I became him without anyone noticing. From there I only needed to evolve naturally until I released my true power, something I got a few thousand years ago, and now, with all these powers, and my perfect compatibility with Origin reality after having been feeding on its laws for millions of years, I have become the absolute being before you. That's why you can't do anything against me, and your Origin project has been looted and all the realities have been unified with my own reality while you were watching the movie. Now and forever I'm the one in charge. In short, Broly since a few thousand years ago had become the absolute existence above all realities after creating the Brawliverse without anyone noticing on Origin reality, and now no one could dethrone him ever again. His initial plan was to make that conquest after fighting Ricardo during the premiere of his movie, taking all the realities of the Omniverse in front of him, but too many complications. He was too old for this shit. Broly only wanted to see his film with peace of mind and return home with his grandchildren's. However, unlike him, Ricardo could only despair, cry, feel empty inside and out, and think about suicide. Damn it. I only needed 100,000 years to become the perfect being. This can't be happening, thousands of ages wasted for nothing, the work of my life, the only thing I wanted. I can't accept this. This is a nightmare. Whatever, you better start accepting the reality, my reality. You can cry on Olivia's skirts later, she would be pleased. Now I want to see my own movie, and stay tuned, we'll discuss how cool it's later. Said Broly, the supreme being, as he gagged Abalon and Ricardo and watched the movie made by himself about himself. Few hours later, in the Dragon Ball reality, in the Kame house. After Broly officially got revenge on Abalon and declared to President Ricardo that he had been ahead of him in becoming the supreme being who was above all realities, our protagonist had finally fulfilled absolutely all his goals in life. Nothing in all of existence could challenge him and could achieve and know everything when and how he wanted. After getting everything, any being would feel a great emptiness, but Broly was different. He still had many, make great and ambitious plans. Excellent. Now that I am the most powerful being that exists in the omniverse and the absolute sovereign as I had always wanted, I can finally reward myself properly. I will finally allow myself to see the end of One Piece. So many millions of years of abstinence will finally end today, said Broly, raising with glory a gold-colored hard drive that contained the complete anime of One Piece, specifically the perfect remastering of the year 2169, where they improved the image, sound and composition of each episode, eliminating all the filling scenes and censure. Each episode has such a quality that all of them seem to be directed by Megumi Ishitani. However, ding dong. Someone rang the bell at that time. Honey, it's Bra and Vegeta Jr., they have come to leave Bulma Jr. and Broly Jr. in our charge for a few days. Do you mind entertaining your grandchildren a bit? Said Bulma, telling the love of her life that her daughter and her husband had brought their youngest grandchildren. Yes, of course, no problem. Tell them I'm in the movie theater, answered Broly, who already knew that they would come, that's why he had already prepared their favorite snacks. And as if there was an earthquake inside the mansion, a boy and a girl of about 10 years old entered the family's private cinema running at full speed. Grandpa! How are you? Shouted Bulma Jr. and Broly Jr. hugging his favorite grandfather as if they were koalas. Ha ha ha. Great as always. Are you happy to see your favorite grandfather again? Said Broly while pinching their cheeks and handed them money on the back of their parents like every great-grandfather does with his grandchildren. And of course his two beloved grandchildren responded with extreme enthusiasm, yes. Of course. Ha 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 ha. I'm glad to see you too. Fuck you Vegeta. I win again. Said and thought Broly, as always taking every opportunity to bully Vegeta even when he was not present. Grandpa, what do we do today? Will we travel to another universe? To another dimension? To another reality? I would like to go to a place with cute animals. Asked Bulma Jr. that he had been dreaming for weeks about the next adventure his grandfather would take them on. I want to destroy another Death Star. Said Broly Jr., who was unable to forget about his previous trip to Star Wars reality. However, Broly had a different idea for this occasion that didn't imply traveling to another reality. I have a better idea. How about watching your grandfather's favorite story? A story called One Piece. Okay, we'll give it a try. Said Bulma Jr. and Broly Jr., who weren't very convinced about this plan. They were more excited about living new exciting adventures instead of sitting in an armchair. However, they did not voice their complaints. They didn't want to disappoint their grandfather, after all they loved him very much. And he said that this is his favorite story, didn't want to hurt his feelings. 2,000 chapters later. Ha 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 ha. Buaha. 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 This is the best thing I have seen in my life, I cry and laugh at the same time. Said Broly Jr. grateful with all his soul for having seen this anime, but above all its incredible ending, which made everyone who had seen it with him laugh and cry at the same time for so many reasons impossible to express with words. Me too, if, ha ha ha. Grandpa, is this the best story in the Omniverse? Asked Bulma Jr. while hugging her grandfather, thanking him with all her heart for showing them this great masterpiece that would change their lives forever. Yes. 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 Of course is it, even better than my movie. It's too perfect even for me. Answered Broly, the perfect supreme being, unable to stop the tears from his eyes while showing humility for the first time in his long life. However, as all otaku knows, there was a great curse after being blessed with a wonderful manga, anime or satri in general. Now I feel a huge existential emptiness. Said Broly Jr. feeling that something was missing in his life after the end of One Piece, and wanted more. Yes I know brother. I want to see more One Piece, But at the same time I don't want a continuation that will destroy this perfect ending, said Bulma Jr. upon realizing about the great contradiction that existed in her mind and heart. An unsolvable contradiction that his brother also shared, yes, is asking for something impossible. However, in front of them was someone who loved to make the impossible possible. You know, I think I have a solution for this problem, said Broly, who had a great idea, although a not very innovative one. That same afternoon, in the origin reality. In Abalon's old office, a man suddenly woke up asking the most normal question anyone would have suddenly woke up in a strange place in a room with a man even stranger, where I'm. What's happening? Welcome number 999999999 of the promotion 87899043930383765765763454325468997895346454767652131. You could say that today is the luckiest day of all your existences, Broly said to the newly summoned, ending his story in the same way and in the same place he started but from a totally different position. However, as is often the case with the end of many adventures, that was only the starting point of a new journey. Here, in the Brawliverse. If you want to support me, check out my Patreon at https://www.patreon.com/Kaioshin. I tend to polls that decide important plot stuff in my P at Trian. Many thanks to my awesome patrons. Ben Phillips, Yami Tancho, Kenny Nielsen, Harold Martinsons. If you enjoyed the content, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to the channel. I'll be here until next time.